Hey folks, this is Pikohan on the North American server, and this is the Farragut in Operation Raptor Rescue in patch 0.9.1. Raptor is one of the original 4 Tier 6 operations, and it is probably still one of the harder ones available now, especially if you're doing it with randoms, though this is a 4-man division. Part of the difficulty, of course, is that Raptor has a lot of different routes, so it's very hard to find universally good positions for all of them, and a lot of times you just have to wing it. This first part is the same for all variants though. You've got the destroyer that comes in from the west and the battleship and the cruiser coming in from the north. At least in the Farragut, you just keep shooting that destroyer, and then as the Ubari comes around the corner, you try to get some citadels on him and try not to get torped. Usually, if you have competent players, or in this case, division, you'll probably die before you can get shots on him, but you have an okay chance of torping the Miyogi if the Ubari dies fast enough, and then you can go around the corner. The trick here really is just to engage each one of those targets one at a time. Sometimes you see random destroyers do this, and they just kind of charge into the 3 of them, and they get focused and they die. The trick to avoiding the Ubari torps is mainly to turn into them, although in this case he died before he could get them off. I did torp the Miyogi, but all the while I'm shooting at him, and he died before my torps hit him anyways. You can see that I'm still firing here, and even though it looks like I'm firing at nothing, I'm trying to keep the gun bloom active so I can tell if it's a north spawn or a south spawn. Usually it's the battleship who should fire to check here, since the gun bloom is the biggest, but there's no real downside for me to keep shooting to get the information myself, especially since in the past couple versions of Raptor, the boats have kind of showed up late, so the first shot from the battleship might not actually tell you whether it's a north or south. So I'm just going to gunboat these guys for a little bit, and once I draw enough aggro, I'm going to smoke up and just stay here. Mostly I want to shoot at the Kuma first, because I can actually pen it with the Farragut guns, and on the flip side I'll try to torp the Ioba in the meantime. I launched the torps pretty early, even though they have a good chance of missing at that range, because usually the Ioba and Kuma come toward me slow enough such that I can reload the torps once the Ioba is at point blank, and I can guarantee the torp hit. Also, one more thing to note is that the Kuma is extremely thin skin, and you can start getting citadels on it, assuming it's giving you broadside at maybe 5 or 6 kilometers, whereas you need to be within maybe 2 or 3 to start getting citadels on Iobas or Furutakas. This last Furutaka in this spawn really likes to go wide, and sometimes actually even the Ioba really likes to go wide, and he can be a little bit tricky to hit with the Farragut's slow shells. Now, after this spawn is finished, regardless of whether it's a north or south spawn, what I want to do is go past the quote-unquote target area that the Raptor is trying to get to in order to intercept the two destroyers that come in from the west. Those two destroyers will spawn and travel along roughly the same path regardless of what variant of Raptor it is, so I always want to go and try to intercept them. If you fail to intercept them, that's one of the easiest ways to get the Raptor killed, because they will try to torp him if there's no one else there. Now, not too many people like playing Destroyer for Raptor, and even those who do might prefer the Anshan or the Fushin, but I like the Farragut because I think the trade-offs that it makes compared to those ships aren't really relevant in Raptor. Like, one of the things is the short torp range. It can't stealth torp, but in operations, you're never going to be stealth torping, just like in co-op, basically. Another thing is that the Farragut has a lot of DPM, and actually a lot of range as well, but it doesn't have the high shell velocity that destroyers like the Anshan or the Fushin might have. But that doesn't really matter because you can usually get pretty up close and personal with priority targets like these two destroyers, where you can make the most of your DPM. And in randoms or some other PvP mode, this wouldn't be the case. The Farragut also, while it may not have the highest top speed, it has reasonable handling and acceleration, and some people might not care so much, but that's really important for me. Now, since we have a carrier, we got a pretty early heads up as to where the main spawn is coming from. Sometimes if you don't have a carrier, or if it's one of the weirder paths, you could be wandering around a little bit trying to figure out where the main attack is going to come from. But since we got an early heads up, I can find a good position and just start shelling the ships that are coming around this corner. Once again, the trick here is just to try to engage one enemy at a time. I'm, again, not going to use the smoke until I'm drawing too much aggro. One of the benefits of the Farragut compared to some of the other destroyers is that it has the long USN smoke, but against this concentrated force here, even that is perhaps not long enough. I'm being a little bit greedy here by going around this island instead of waiting toward the north. If I stayed on the north side, even after I smoked and my smoke ran out, I can still escape by going around the island. If I smoke up out in the open here, if I don't kill all these ships or the smoke runs out and there's a lot of ships left, well, I could be in a not that great a spot, especially since there's actually a Miyoko that comes from the south as well. While I'm here, what I want to do is try to get citadels on the Ioba and then torp the battleships. Basically, you want to use your guns for the thing they're going to be best at, and use your torps on the thing that they're going to be best at, so you aren't basically trying to shoot a ship that your torps would take out anyways. Of course, if there's a Kuma, you shoot that first because it's the thing that you can pen even without having to citadel it, but we already killed the Kuma before coming down here. I threw one set of torps at different battleships, again kind of min-maxing it so I don't waste any torps. If you fire 2 spreads of torps at one battleship but it only takes half of them to kill it, you're wasting the other 4. Here I'm pretty confident that if 2 battleships take 4 torps, I can just gun them down afterward. And at this point, even if I don't kill these battleships, it's not enough firepower to put me at risk after the smoke runs out. The Miyoko coming from the south is a problem though. What I would have liked to do is have the torps reloaded before the smoke ran out, such that I can basically launch a point-blank spread on the Miyoko just as the smoke is expiring. However, I shot the first set of torps at the battleships a little bit late because I was focused on the Ioba. Fortunately, my division mate in the Perth was able to take out the Miyoko such that I could spend the torps on the battleships instead. And all in all, that whole series worked out pretty well for me. One more thing to note is that due to the low gun caliber of the Farragut, and most other destroyers as well, when you're shooting at battleships, you really can't pen much besides the superstructure, especially since a lot of the battleships in these operations have a lot of distributed armor as well. So you're limited to saturating the superstructure and then getting fires for damage, which is not amazing. The same is really the case for Iobas and Furutakas because of the thick decks and thick side plating. That's why it's pretty important to try to get in positions where you can use your AP against those Japanese cruisers if possible. Now, we actually got a center exit for the Raptor, which is the shortest route because the Raptor, of course, doesn't have to go that far. But we also mopped up all the primary enemies pretty quickly. I'm actually going back to try to help with the Hosho, since it looks like the PEF is going to secure the objective of getting to the cap before Raptor. If this was a pure randoms game, I would usually just avoid going for the Hosho altogether, because it's better to get fewer stars and secure the win by getting the Raptor through than going off to chase this guy. Inevitably, in a random game, you know that the slowest battleship is going to be the guy who's trying to go after this carrier. Finally, since we have a sufficient number of people alive, we are going to get to teleport spawns here at the end. Usually these are just XP pinatas, but they will shoot the Raptor if they get close enough, so you do have to take them out. The location of where these guys teleport spawn varies depending on the path that Raptor takes, but I was lucky enough to get them down here while I was going for the Hosho, such that I can get all the XP. The Furutaka did die by torps, but as you can see, while he was broadside and close up, I used the AP and it actually took quite a bit of health off him before that final torp hit. And you'll see it again with the Ioba. I smoked here a little bit reactively, but at this range it doesn't even matter if they can see me, because I'll delete them before they could even turn the guns and get 1 or 2 salvos off. And that's pretty much the end of the operation. The 223k is a pretty decent result for Raptor, although I saved this particular game because of the 34 sits. That part is a little bit unusual, especially for the Farragut. The 1900 base is also pretty good, but this may be before econ nerfs. And on that note, this is the end of the video, so have a nice day.